What's good, everyone? We're live. Gonna be going through the arraignment of Donald Trump, which I pulled up on CNN just so that no one can say I'm pulling up some radical news network. Cutting it kind of close to the wire. It's supposed to start at 2:15. So let me share my screen. Here. And right now, yeah, everyone's just waiting in the calm before the storm before they call Trump's arraignment number and bring him into the courthouse. But yeah, figured we'd see this unprecedented moment in history. Just we haven't gone through this as a country before, so it's important to be able to react in real time and understand the implications of this, and what it's going to look like. The reality is, yeah, hope you can hear me over the audio, even though nothing's going on. Yeah, the reality is, in unprecedented circumstances like this, I mean, we have seen this in many other countries, even in Nigeria for the elections. There, a couple of weeks ago, there were many different candidates who were assassinated in elections in countless countries that the U.S. has interfered with, and regimes that were toppled, chaos that has ensued. It has not happened here. This is the first time that the effects of our own government's influence campaigns abroad is now we're facing the blowback of this. Understanding what that looks like is going to help us sift through the chaos moving forward. While I'm here, let me update banner. Before this had happened, it's a shame. The New York Times had published that there are probably, and considering these parasites have been leaking all this other information about Trump's arraignment, the New York Times had said that there's probably not going to be a mugshot, which is a travesty. We're not going to get leaked. We're not going to get a leaked headshot of Trump to go viral. So, but yeah, I'm going to work on this banner here while we're waiting. Now, in the words of Donald J. Trump, we stand back, we stand by. There's the ticker. Turn the volume down for now, just so I can continue opining. What was that? Yeah, I don't know if there are any other. I mean, there's allegedly 500 different news organizations on the ground outside the New York City courthouse. I mean, because this is a dark historical moment that all of the vultures in the mainstream media want to milk as much as possible for views and to reinforce or somehow take profit, like attention, off of the fact that this trial is, for lack of a better term, legal. It's that it's everyone is expecting chaos to break out. Everyone's expecting, and everyone on both sides, I've seen from liberals and from MAGA people calling for peace in the streets, but expecting a repeat of January 6th, considering that was another moment in American history we had never seen before. Just thousands of American citizens storming the Capitol building. And people are expecting a repeat of this, where even though that right at this very moment there are thousands of MAGA people in New York City having a rally outside of New York City courthouse, liberals are so triggered at this point, trying to raise alarm bells and trying to persecute everyone involved within the MAGA movement, that they're already calling this rally. It's not a riot. It's barely a protest. It's more of a rally outside the New York City protest, calling it like hypocrisy. That it's, I thought they were against Antifa violence. And I had posted a video of the crowd earlier on YouTube Shorts and also on TikTok, and and within 30 minutes it had been seen hundreds and hundreds of times. And on TikTok, where liberals have free reign, dozens of people commenting that this arraignment is justified, that no one is above the law, that those MAGA degenerates shouldn't be out there rioting in the streets. But considering we have seen hours and hours of footage of France burning to the ground, of Israel experiencing the eve of a civil war, a couple people with MAGA banners and flags being properly behaved in New York. It's wild how there's that disconnect with Democrats and liberals in general. We have come to a point where half of the country cannot even recognize peaceful assembly anymore, where this is being called illegitimate organization by nature of the fact that it's for Donald Trump, who we should always point out is being charged for something that is not a crime, that he committed no crime, that even if it was a crime, the misdemeanor of changing some information on campaign paperwork for a non-disclosure agreement, which is a fairly standard business or political practice. What would have been a misdemeanor if it was even a crime, which it's not, has now been turned into a federal charge with 34 other indictments in the wings that we're waiting to see what those are. Because that was also illegally leaked by Trump's prosecution. So the liberal fascists, the Biden fascists, who are calling for, basically setting the seedbed for revoking First Amendment rights to assembly, let alone all other amendment rights for recent events. Lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. This was supposed to happen at 2:15. They're 10 minutes late at this point. Well, since I lost my train of thought, just saying this to go off on why the New York Times had posted that we're not going to get that Trump mugshot. So if you were expecting a viral mugshot, I hate to say it, there is probably not going to be one. And I was hoping to like sell some T-shirts or something based on based on that viral mugshot. And according to the New York Times, they say it's because it would be too logistically challenging to move Trump from the courthouse to the police precinct where they would have to take his mugshot, and that would cause all sorts of logistical problems. They already have so many photos of the president, who is like this world famous figure who led the country for 4 years and is one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. And this, the New York Times said, is why they don't expect there to be a mugshot, when really we know it's because they don't want to further valorize Trump and Trump's base, who has showed up in the thousands in New York City. They don't want to create a shrine to Donald Trump, who everyone knows is being arrested for political reasons, not because he committed a crime, but because he is the primary political opponent to the Biden regime. That mugshot would. I was hoping there was going to be one. I can like set up a T-shirt shop, just Photoshop it onto a shirt, make some money. And doesn't look like there's going to be one, which is a shame. Who knows? Maybe who knows? Maybe there will be. Maybe there will be some memeable content, if not the legendary mugshot. Who knows? We have never been in this situation before. One thing I am looking forward to, though, allegedly, after the arraignment, Trump is going to fly back to Mar-a-Lago to give a speech. So I'm not sure this is confirmed. I haven't looked into it to confirm. But the other day when he left Mar-a-Lago to come to New York City, sources were saying that he was planning to fly back to Mar-a-Lago after this to give a speech, which, having been born and raised in Miami, and Mar-a-Lago being near Miami, it's a very short drive away, I would love the redemption of Miami Gusanos for all of the decades of political infiltration, like Cuban version of Zionism, just infiltrating American politics and foreign policy, the terrorist attacks against Cuba, all of the tomfoolery going on with that demographic, the possible assassination of JFK by the Cuban Gusano Mafia in Miami. I would love the redemption of this demographic, my people, to spirit away the Donald Trump and in an underground railroad to seek asylum in Cuba, where he would carry out the rest of his campaign as an Eric Snowden type fugitive. Just all of the Cuban, the old 70, 80-year-old, the last of the Gusanos fleeing Castro's revolution, suddenly like forming a wall of people defending Mar-a-Lago just in front of the gates, telling the police that they shall not pass. Sort of like what they did with the president of Pakistan when when crowds were trying to assassinate and carry him off, Gaddafi style. I would love to see that from my people. My people have been taking L's. My my people in Miami taking a lot of L's, and as this is unsurprising considering their class background. Just something, some historical redemption for all of the Gusanos in Miami to do something useful with their lives before they die. So I'm hoping, since we're probably not going to get a mugshot, I'm bummed about that. This is something else to look forward to. Unconfirmed reports. John, what are we in then? What is this, in the courthouse? I stopped paying attention for a second. Fantasize. Yeah, the arraignment was supposed to start 15 minutes ago, so already it looks like the logistics of arresting your political opponents has already gotten the better of the New York courthouse. They're starting 30 minutes late. Well, 15 minutes late, I should say. Okay, they were just zooming out. But I'm glad to see that so many thousands of people showed up in New York to show their support. And in true fashion, unlike the ultra leftist French, unlike the Jacobin French trash, our MAGA movement is very well behaved out there outside of the city courthouse. Everyone's chill. There are no fires. Everyone's got their banner, but everything's chill. Even the leftist brain dead leftists who showed up aren't really causing too. They're far outnumbered. I do not blame them for not causing any scene because they're very outnumbered. Didn't Biden make a statement about not letting Trump run either way? And yeah, Biden also blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. So. Yeah, you read my mind. Reminiscent of the Nord Stream statement. Yeah, reminiscent of the Nord Stream statement. You read my mind exactly. Yeah, I had seen a previous video from yesterday from deep state operative Peter Zion. I've talked about him before in other live streams. He's really gained popularity these past few months. Really since the start of the Ukraine war last year, and in the last 3 months or so, in specific, Peter Zion, Zeihan, has really gained prominence. He was featured on the Joe Rogan podcast in January, the biggest podcast in the world. He was the guest feature on the Joe Rogan podcast. State think tank spook. He put out a video on his YouTube channel the other day saying that of all of the outcomes in the 2024 election, he expects Biden to win for all of these made up reasons. Everything that comes out of his mouth is, you can tell, is just a script he's giving to his other lesser known deep state operatives. But the script that he is handing liberals in the media, in other think tanks who write policy, who cheerlead for Joe Biden, he's giving them the script that he expects. He knows that Trump is the Republican candidate. There is, no matter who runs, Trump is the candidate, especially after this martyrdom of the of the New York City prosecution on fake charges, Trump is the Republican candidate. And Mr. Deep State Peter Zion also knows that the old guard of the Democratic Party, who is clinging to relevance, who is desperately, literally, like Biden, literally trying not to die every day. He is sucking in air and fighting back dementia, trying to keep his decrepit heart beating. Is willing to do unprecedented levels of industrial terrorism, such as with the Nord Stream pipeline, to to arrest political opponents, to steal the thunder of the younger cadre within the party, and in order to consolidate their power for just a little bit longer, to keep Biden in power for 4 more years, even if they have to hook him up to an iron lung. And of these two, in a political conflict, Biden, who is basically ancient Hitler, and Trump, who is the popular candidate of anyone fielded so far, and anyone who could be fielded, no one matches that level of support. Zion still expects Biden to win, and because he's on his home turf. The script he's giving is that Trump is too embroiled in legal processes, too divisive, too 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 partisan to win a national coalition. And he pointed something out, which, like, I get DeSantis is taking stances on the trans issue that I agree with, but has he changed his Warhawk sentiments? He has not. He has not. And yeah, he really is just going to fall lockstep in whatever the GOP hands him. He is basically just, what was it? Nick Fuentes had pointed out, he's basically just John McCain. just your standard Warhawk finance minister, just your standard milquetoast, run-of-the-mill rhino. Yeah, and then just tailing the masses on cultural issues so that he can advance all this other basic austerity. Because as Nick Fuentes pointed out, DeSantis knows he cannot win without Trump's base. So he needs to throw them something, some sort of crumb to make him appear as a populist guy. And we're getting a lot of mileage out of this this LGBT issue. So he can tout this popular line of being against the trans propaganda and against wokeness, but that doesn't really change his position on war with China, war with Ukraine, on continuing this path of fiscal responsibility. The same fiscal responsibility that did nothing to lower the debt ceiling on a $30 trillion American debt ceiling, that did nothing to end the increased defense spending budgets. That is, just a meaningless statement at this point. He's basically just a much younger version of John McCain. What was I saying about deep state Peter Zion? Yes, deep state spook Peter Zion had pointed something out that I really found interesting because I hadn't been thinking of it in these terms, that Trump being like the most nationalist president that we've had, being putting the rhetoric of America first in everyone's minds, and understanding that this is not just a popular stance, but one that is economically necessary, of needing to end foreign wars, needing to increase domestic production. He had said that Biden, other than Trump, Joe Biden is the most nationalist president we've ever had. And it's funny because, again, bringing up Nick Fuentes had also said that Biden had a number of based Biden moments that nobody in the MAGA movement wants to acknowledge, but is becoming more apparent with each passing week. I mean, pulling out of Afghanistan and increasing oil production, not just in Alaska, but now in Texas, planning to increase oil production in the Gulf of Mexico, to increase oil production owned by the United States. It's it's funny that Biden also understands to be able to continue centralizing the executive authority under the Democratic Party, as he has been, replacing police with National Guard members, as he did with Atlanta, and is trying to do permanently with the Cop City, production of the National Guard, transformation of police across the country, with industrial terrorism of America's allies overseas, with the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, and with the banning of synthetic agriculture in Sri Lanka, with the unprecedented size of defense spending, with the jailing of political opponents. The fascist Joe Biden really is more of a populist than we understand him to be. At least me personally, at least I understood him to be. Having it be pointed out to me by a deep state spook is just funny. Because it really points out that these people are self-aware. They're very, as I've been saying for years and years, before I had a YouTube channel, the ruling class, the billionaires and millionaires and decrepit cronies of capitalism and politicians like Joe Biden, they have more class consciousness than you do. Joe Biden has more class consciousness than any of us laymen. He needs to have him and his cronies need to have a very developed sense of class consciousness in order to suppress the organization, the interests of the MAGA movement, which is America's premier counter-hegemonic working class movement. Biden and his cronies, and the billionaire finance capitalist ruling class, your Elon Musks and your Jeff Bezoses, the richest people in the country who make all of their money off of financing or speculation off of their companies. They have more class awareness than you do. They're intimately self-conscious about what they can do to suppress the popular will to take them out of power, to placate the working class people. Part of this, it goes back to when they stopped doing police beatdowns of protesters and unionists 100 plus years ago, and they just replaced that with a robust welfare state, as FDR did on the eve of World War II, just increasing American manufacturing and production, and then all of the surplus value that didn't go into the war machine was used for infrastructure campaigns and welfare campaigns for the American people to create like a very robust welfare state that's only got bigger over time. It was expanded under Lyndon Johnson, that became more austere under Reagan, but was still, the primary function of government was to redistribute wealth. It's the capitalist class who had already extracted the surplus value of the working class and made themselves rich, like the wealthiest people that history has ever known, redistributing that wealth through taxation or just through their own uh, magnanimity into welfare programs, such that we see in California with their homeless industrial complex, with their lunacy talking about giving millions of dollars in reparations to Black Californians, and all other such social programs. The voluntary redistribution of their wealth, gutting the American middle class, which was propped up by manufacturing, in order to increase the number of millionaires and billionaires who got rich off of financing, redistributing their wealth to an increasingly larger and poorer working class through social programs and welfare programs, so that the American middle class, which got large over American manufacturing, was shrinking back down, being squeezed, the population being squeezed out, increasing the size of the number of billionaires in the country from a couple dozen to, I think we're at about 1,000 billionaires in America right now. So increasing their number tenfold, but not as significantly as the increase in the number of poor and working class people dependent on some sort of social welfare. This being exacerbated by the fact that America is now just a predominantly service economy, service and retail economy. We no longer have any manufacturing to build back up our middle class. Predominantly, America, the predominant function of the American economy is to service the elites, not just to manage the end product that they are selling to the population, like your baristas, and to and to be the ones serving these suburbanites and these urbanites their lattes, to literally be serving them. So serving them in the Marxist sense, that they are just an excess cost of serving the surplus of someone else's labor to the masses as a whole, and also just literally serving them their $1,000 squid ink Manhattan pizza. There's no more American manufacturing, no more middle class foundation. This is perpetual sifting of the population into an increasingly poorer, more welfare addicted working class, or service industry parasites, and an insulated layer of ruling class billionaires, their 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 midwit white collar hordes who administer all of their policies and their tasks, and all of the service worker parasites who suck off of the teat of their finances. Biden understands all of this, but where Trump wanted to increase American manufacturing, Biden wants to increase the systems of social programming, social welfare. On the back of, certainly on the back of American industry, I'm sure these these oil fields being opened up in Alaska and the Gulf of Texas will produce many well-paying jobs, but I can't imagine that oil being produced there will be used for anything other than selling to the European market at triple the cost of or more that they would have been paying for Russian natural gas and Russian oil, and just that propping up of the American economy, just selling this stuff, not to the benefit of the American population, but to increase the wallets of the oil bankers of the ruling class, so that they can voluntarily redistribute that wealth into social programs to quell the popular unrest of the working class. Biden putting on the veneer of a populist, the veneer of a nationalist. Pulling out of Afghanistan, he knows that he needs to pull out of Afghanistan because he's going to have to pivot that entire military machine to his own population. As the system is dying, and all of these proxy wars overseas continue to deteriorate. Biden is pivoting to retract all of the globalist tentacles that we had come to associate with the American world police, military occupying the Middle East, the importing of major commodities like oil. This is why we needed to occupy those countries in the first place. But Biden having to retract all of it, retract the military, and increase domestic oil production. To have a domestic focus on reforming finance capital, which we all know, like the reformation of collapsing finance monopolies, is just fascism. Yeah, Biden needs to understand popular class consciousness and class conflict. I was reading, and these people are taking a long ass time, huh? I was reading some works by Julius Evola, the Italian philosopher. I think he was a member of the Italian Fascist Party. No, he was never a member of the Italian Fascist Party. And was critical of it throughout his life, but he was a right wing. He called himself a traditionalist, and I find it valuable reading Evola because him having written many criticisms of the fascist doctrine of not anything I agree with, but seeing almost like an Alexander Dugin style criticism of the fascist third position from a political stance that is not Marxism, Leninism, or liberalism is useful. It gives you more of an insight into the deviations of fascism, how like the doctrine of fascism as written by people like Mussolini. This utopian, like this socialist utopian ideal written out in these flowery manifestos and doctrines. Your Italian fascists, your Spanish phalangists. Seeing those being criticized not from a scientific Marxist point of view, but from a view of the traditionalist right of Europe, who were criticized, like Julius Evola, who was criticizing fascism for deviating from that utopian vision in very clear ways. And I think being able to, I think having that insight is important. The conservative, the conservative right has utopian visions just as much as just as much as anyone else. I mean, just as much as the lunatic left has utopian socialist vision. So does the traditional right. But people like Julius Evola just tapping into, and Alexander Dugin tapping into, it was a tradition that is much more familiar to the masses, to regular people. Uh, yeah, you can read Fourth Political Theory. I liked his book, The Theory of a Multipolar World, because he had pointed out that there has, as of yet, before he had written that book, been no scientific definition of what a multipolar world is. So he lays out the parameters for how we know we are moving towards or away from a multipolar world, like what the qualities of that would be, and listing out a number of other political and philosophical theories that would provide useful tools for giving us this framework. It's short, it's digestible, and it's very useful considering people from all over the political spectrum realize the value of moving towards a multipolar world. I think really pushing that scientific definition so that people cannot co-opt the phrase is more useful than reading his. I didn't get through the Fourth Political Theory. I got like a quarter of the way through it. And again, it is useful because having that traditionalist criticism of liberalism, Marxism, and fascism is useful to get out of the Marxist mindset. I don't consider myself a Marxist, and so I find it useful to have other people besides African revolutionaries like Amilcar Cabral and Kwame Nkrumah who weren't Marxists but were communists. They just weren't Marxists or didn't self-identify as that. Who it's useful to have as many political theorists in my tool belt as possible. But yeah, it's a bit more of a larger project to define this fourth political theory than to define one aspect of the fourth political theory, which Dugin knows a fourth political theory will be inherently multipolar. So, like, starting with a more specific goal, more immediate goal of understanding what multipolar even means. I find that more useful. I don't know why I didn't do that earlier. So that's where I would start personally, especially because we have all these Twitter leftists and Maoists, anarchists, general lunatics online who either condemn multipolarity off the bat or who water down what that means because they don't have a scientific definition of it to the point where it's just a useless phrase. It's just a meme with no substance behind it. And we can't let that happen because it actually is very useful. We're in the age of the ascendancy of BRICS, of OPEC, of these of the Chinese civilization. We're seeing the reascendancy of the Chinese civilization. So knowing how these how these foundations and these civilizations will interact with each other, and how we can gauge them as a positive step forward or a step back is, we can't cede that to these Twitter lunatics. That being said, I do find myself agreeing a lot more with Dugin than I do with Julius Evola. Still, I mean, I wrote a lot more personal blog. I write blogs for myself and for no one else. Maybe one day I will publish them. But I found myself writing like literally like a 5,000 word document based on Julius Evola's criticisms of fascism from the traditionalist right. If we could approach more of that Marxist like dialectical materialism and a historical like science to these utopian ideas that the traditionalists have have passed the torch for these many decades. Then I think we can very well approach something like a fourth political theory. Yeah, I'd seen when when the Black Hammer Party and the Patriotic Socialist Front had posted that they were starting like this media coalition, and I'd seen pretty pretty frequent mentions of the Evola pop up. So I had said to myself, well, I guess I need to read Evola now. And there's a lot there, even if I don't really agree with it. It's still, like, the language is informative. The most important thing that I find myself agreeing with Evola is the non-reducibility of civilization and civilizations throughout the world. In saying, he also wrote many critiques against National Socialist racism, like Nazi race science. The funny thing was that he believed in almost a spiritual racism, like this caste system based on your proximity to a national spirit that embodies the civilizational mode. And the closer you are in proximity to this civilizational spirit to preserve and advance your people. The higher position in society you should have, which again, I don't really agree with that. I mean, that's very metaphysical. But based off of this presumption, he said that civilizations, therefore, are not reducible to each other. Like the spirit of the Western civilization is not reducible to the spirit of the African civilization, is not reducible to the spirit of the Chinese civilization. These formations are not universal. Nothing about them is universal. And Dugan also agrees with that position. So do I. This non-universal, that the civilization is not reducible to some universal standard that liberalism tells us is true. It's not. And also, this is important, that civilization is not reducible to the atomistic parts. That is very invaluable. It takes a lot of the pressure off of any one particular section of society to represent the spirit of America, the spirit of China, the spirit of a united African continent. And the leadership of these federations, these republics, whatever they end up being, I think it should be hierarchical. Hierarchies and leadership are just fundamental parts of human organization. Much as anarchists would like to tell you otherwise. Like maybe we see the creation of a communist, even under the creation of a communist reality, where every corner of the world advances to a communist society. Even then, we would still have hierarchy, just not an antagonistic class-based hierarchy. It would be a non-antagonistic hierarchy. I don't know what that looks like yet. But yeah, the non-reducibility of civilizations to each other and to their atomistic parts. Useful. And people like Nick Fuentes, like Haas, also advancing this idea. And the frustrating thing is that that me not being a race realist like Fuentes or a Marxist like Haas, just seeing shortcomings in both of their understandings of how to define civilization or the primary engines that drive civilization. Sorry, I'm just focusing on the feed here. I'm wondering if there's something going on behind the scenes. If all of the cool stuff is happening behind closed doors, because the commentators aren't even making comments anymore. Is there Is there a live feed somewhere that's not nothing? Is there a live feed on some mainstream news network where it's like on another side of the building where something real is going on? Because I'd hate to be just pontificating while missing history here. Yeah. I wanted to see that though. Yeah, if he did plead not guilty, I mean, I wanted to see that. Are there are there commentators inside the courthouse? Let's check. 'Cause why did 500 news organizations go here if they're not going to be like filming thing? NBC. Because if we have to switch screen, oh well, these people are actually talking, so that's who's leaking this stuff to Disclose? Who does Disclose know that all of this stuff is being leaked to them? Yeah, I might share this tab instead. Sorry, CNN, but you suck and can't. Yeah, I want to see what the mainstream media is saying about this.
Chaos. It's been a bit chaotic outside the courtroom. I'm sorry, outside the courthouse. You've got literally media from around the world, from Japan, from Finland and Sweden and Germany and England, and dozens from stations around the country. So he asked that we need to work together on a media plan going forward as we anticipate a trial, that the public is kept aware of what's going on. He asked, could we put people in the jury box so we can see some facial expressions of the defendant? Everybody in the courtroom is behind the defendant, so we can't see what his facial expressions are. And then anything that's involved with the court, any documents, anything as part of discovery, that's made public promptly. And again, laptops. We understand security concerns. This judge typically, he just handled the Trump payroll court case. He allowed laptops. The judge said he would allow going forward. Just this arraignment is an unusual situation. The security is very high. So for today, no laptops, no electronics were allowed in the courtroom, but he seemed to indicate that going forward, not only will he allow reporters to sit in the jury box if he can make it happen, but that laptops will be allowed to be.
I don't know if y'all could hear what the guy was saying on NBC, but he brings up a good point that, there's no cameras in the courtroom to get Trump's face, no cameras being allowed in the courtroom to get a sense of the mood or in the jury box. I know that's allowed because we have this whole precedent of the 24-hour news stream of every goddamn trial, but all the way back to O.J. Simpson, which was sort of the watershed moment of liberal media 24-hour streams of what's going on in the courthouses of this this celebrity trial. All of these cameras in those circumstances, but not this one. They really don't want us to have any memeable content of this arraignment. They want nothing except what they can leak illegally to Disclose TV. anyway.
Be used.
Was there any discussion of change of venue? I know there were no formal motions that we know of, but was there any conversation or anything said about change of venues?
Not while I was in the room, and that would be very unlikely. But we did hear that maybe there had been some suggestion by the defense team to move it to Staten Island, for example, which is another borough of New York City, which is much more friendly to conservatives and to someone like Mr. Trump.
All right. Adam Reese, again, who was in the courtroom, has now stepped out, and this hearing apparently continuing forward. As you noted, there was a media attorneys there speaking about future access and video equipment. And perhaps that might have slowed down the process, but they are still in there in an arraignment where typically the guilty or not guilty, and in this case, the former president entering obviously a not guilty plea as his lawyers had anticipated. We will continue to watch that camera in the hallway. The former president did not speak as he was going in, simply gave a glance toward a questioner in the hallway there. We don't know on the way out if he will speak, but I think we're all struck by the DA's office bringing up this issue about the former president's behavior and statements and social media posts, the troubling nature of those, and the judge obviously aware of them. What have you both learned so far?
Troubling. Nobody finds it troubling that Joe Biden is jailing his political opponents? How is someone supposed to act when the boot of the state is on a former politician? Even if there had been a crime, not something as lame as paying hush money to a porn star, which non-disclosure agreements are very common practices. Even if there was a crime, Biden exploded the Nord Stream pipeline. George W. Bush started an illegal war that killed 1 million Iraqis. But they were so unapologetic. They were civil and apologetic. The number of people, I cannot with this no one is above the law nonsense. I can't do it. Even when all of these MAGA supporters show up and are peaceful and respectful, even when Trump has made no calls to incite any rioting and has been strategically avoidant of that kind of language, yeah, he has a right to complain, being the first president in the United States history to be jailed by his successor. This is what they want you to do. They want you to roll over and just take the boot to the face. Where any sort of even compliance is seen as dissident action. Even compliance is seen as dissident action, where you now must be forcefully manhandled by the legal and military machinery of this emerging Hitlerite fascism in the country. It still surprises me. I don't know why. I don't know why it does, but it still surprises me that, it doesn't surprise me that the media says this. That's their job, is to foment that kind of psychosis. But it still surprises me that so many liberals online and in real life just swallow the blue pill. Just go along with it. Yeah, the Hitler-Trotsky synthesis. Fascism and anarchism, and this the sort of left deviant tendency have always been hand in hand. I would argue that fascism was never the, 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 the negation of liberalism that Marxists thought it to be, or that liberals thought it to be. Even the fact that people like Dugin talk about a fourth political theory, that fascism is somehow qualitatively different than the liberal hegemony, just isn't, or that anarchism is qualitatively different. That's another thing that I came to understand reading Julius Evola, is how democratic fascist regimes were. Mussolini appealing to whole crowds of Italians, the Italian people, of tapping into the nation as a crowd, to force the nation to make decisions as an uncoordinated group and as an ultra democratic group. That he would foment this popular sentiment where no one would be able to coordinate or have hierarchical leadership around or administration of except him and his close circle or his thugs. And then he would implement this will of the crowd. And this was this ultra democratic process. Julius Evola describes this as a common feature of many fascists and fascist movements in Europe at the time. Very interesting to me, because we think of fascism as the cracking down of the popular will, as the authoritarian dampening of democratic processes. But really, it's just the deterministic administration of liberalism. What do I mean by this? I mean, it is the philosophy of liberalism, of this individual, of this rule of individuals, and this free market anarchy of individuals all dealing with each other. It is enforcing that philosophy. It is destroying all forms of social institutions which create organization and form to people's economic interests, to their values, to preserve their social traditions, destroying those things so that people really are just atomistic individuals, these anarchistic crowds whose sole outlet of representation is the fascist dictator. There is a Nazi anarchy dialectic that liberalism has always been, that fascism just makes quantitatively stronger, not qualitatively different, if you ask me. And this is coming from people who lived through Mussolini's Italy and wanted to see and were disappointed that Mussolini strayed from this utopian doctrine, this fascist utopian doctrine, that it was too democratic. I was saying that fascism was too democratic. Very funny. Very funny. So liberalism is the Hitler-Trotsky synthesis. I mean, I know Trotsky wasn't an anarchist, but so not exactly what you were saying, but I mean, still, it is just turning up the dial of liberalism. So yeah, when you see, and this is why I'm against the French protests, as opposed to like these protests going on outside the New York City court building. When you see the thousands of MAGA people outside of the courthouse behaving themselves and chanting, Trump 24, they're not even chanting anything crazy or violent or insurrectionary or rude. They're not even chanting anything rude. They're chanting Trump 24. They still, despite everything, the people, despite all of the attacks on democratic institutions, on them personally, 1,000 people locked up by the FBI, despite all of these attacks against social institutions and society itself, the MAGA movement still has faith in the historical process and is refusing to give in to this Antifa mindset of burning everything down and build from the ashes. Whereas the French, for the past 6 weeks, have completely divulged themselves of this anarchist tendency. They have divulged themselves, that's not the right word, but indulged themselves in this anarchist tendency, which leads me to believe that, as opposed to these very orderly MAGA protests outside of the courthouse, when they're present, when the head of the MAGA movement is being put in jail, that level of discipline, as compared to the French, who are burning down 5 million people at this point, burning down their country because they don't want to work an extra 2 years. It's not a reaction. It is not an organized or even a disorganized call to negate Macron, to negate the system that Macron represents. It is a call to replace him with a more advanced version of Macron, of a more austere finance minister, of a more Hitlerite version of Macron. You feel me? If Nazi anarchy dialectic, if the Nazi anarchy dialectic is just it's just the quantitative shift of liberal hegemony, of just the same relationship between people and the state, but just turned all the way up to 11. Yeah, they aren't looking for someone who represents a shift away from neocolonialism, from finance monopoly, from social welfare. They don't want to shift away from that. They want to crank it up. Yeah, Macron is a crony of the bankers. That's what they liked about him. Because as long as France kept alive this neocolonial Franc-Afrique policy of where all of this wealth came from in the middle of of economic turmoil, the plundering, the not even like the old plundering of the 20th century, like new attempts to plunder the old French colonies in Ghana, in Mali, in Lebanon, in Burkina Faso, all of which saw a renewed interest in French debt enslavement, military involvement, theft. While Macron was president, now that Macron has ended that policy, France has no neocolonial pipeline of debt and financing to service these social welfare programs, like being able to retire at 62. Oh, boo-hoo, you have to work until you're 64. Yeah, right at the expression of France from Burkina Faso and Mali. And like pretty much everywhere. Like, yeah, Macron had to admit defeat. Yeah, Macron had to admit defeat and just end the Francophone foreign policy of chaining the old French colonies to French finance capital. The people of France intrinsically understand this, maybe not consciously, but in terms of their values around labor and foreign policy and self-image and self-respect. Like, they don't see any self-respect in sacrifice. They don't see any self-respect in self-determination. If they did, they wouldn't have let their nuclear energy programs decay so that they can't actually provide enough electricity for France now that they aren't getting cheap Russian oil. Like, France, 80% of France's energy comes from nuclear power. It did at one point, came from nuclear power, but they've let those nuclear power plants decay such that when all these old plants need to go offline for maintenance, they won't be able to supply enough French energy. They don't see any self-respect in self-determination, in hard work. Clearly not in hard work, because retiring at 60, 5 million people willing to burn down the country because they can't retire at 62, where in America it's 67, is regarded, actually. It is mentally regarded, actually. They do not want a shift away from Macron's liberalism. They want to crank it up. They want a Hitlerite. They want a Biden-style Hitlerite. And they are calling out, now that their social programs are so decayed, and their welfare programs defunct. They are calling out for their own Hitlerite version of Macron to bring back this teat of finance capital to chain themselves to. You don't see that with the MAGA movement. The discipline of the MAGA movement is exactly why I feel 100% confident in condemning the French. 100% confident. Stand back, stand by. That is the spirit that has, and we knew that the riots weren't like this worse than 9/11 scenario that the media was painting it to be. But now we have, like, Tucker Carlson showing us the video footage for the world to acknowledge, to be like Alex DeLarge in Clockwork Orange and just peel their eyes back and force them to look at the footage of all of these people just being led into the building by police, and 1,000 of those people now in jail for doing what they were told to do because they had such faith in the system. Not in the system of liberalism, but in democracy, in the historical process and the historical reality that people make history, that by being there, they were inserting themselves in history and therefore improving their civilization, improving their nation, simply by being there, peacefully. Trying to suppress the violent elements in the crowd. We have video evidence of that now too, that we're forcing liberals to acknowledge. such faith in this reality and a discipline to adhere to that theory is why I feel so confident in condemning the French. I talked to my dad a lot about the protests in France and the anarchists, and he brings up the Yellow Vests. Have they remained principled in their protests? I mean, the Yellow Vest movement too. Like I remember videos of the Yellow Vest protests. It wasn't as the Molotov cocktails weren't being thrown back then, but even the Yellow Vest movement, there's no unpopular opinion time. There's no such thing as a European working class. There's not as long as they continue to adhere to this neo-colonial pipeline in the Middle East and in Eurasia and in Africa, as long as they continue to suckle at the teat of NATO imperialism, led by the American deep state, there is no European working class. Because there's no European self-determination. Not as a system of values or as a material reality. Not like in America. Like if we wanted to, we could do what China did 200 years or however long it was ago, but when they burned their navies and just retracted and just focused on themselves. We could do that if we wanted to. That's what we're trying to do with an America First type political movement, is to bring back domestic agriculture, domestic manufacturing, domestic job production, domestic focus on president, like the executive branch, focusing their policies on the American people and not on starting wars overseas. We could do that. Europe can't. Europe cannot. They are 100% dependent on external forces. Some of those forces being the neo-colonial finance system of the Bretton Woods, world, the Bretton Woods system, and of NATO imperialism, which is not even like domestically European. It's 100% led by the United States. If it was like a domestic, like European Union, European Union, which is something different. If it was like a domestically led European military bloc, I would say differently. Like an internal European security bloc, an internal European finance system, an internal European mode of production that Germany willingly allowed to get blown up by Joe Biden. Willingly, without a peep, without so much as a peep from the German population. There is no European working class. It doesn't exist. Closing up only presupposes that we won't have leadership pursuing financial cooperation in other polls. Yeah, and that's very extreme. I'm being extreme in my example that we could completely isolate ourselves and be a hermit kingdom. But yeah, we should encourage the cooperation with other poles in a multipolar world order, in technological cooperation with China, in in economic cooperation with Russia, building the land bridge across Russia into Alaska, and having the exchange of goods and culture just across Eurasia and America. Like, we should have that. I'm just saying, if it came down to it, we could just go full hermit kingdom. So, yeah, the MAGA movement is just so much the superior force to whatever is going on in Europe right now. It's because that discipline, that faith in the historical process, and not in their individual desire to lash out, in that social discipline of the tradition of dissent, which is not in throwing Molotov cocktails. That's not what dissent is. But in just inserting themselves as a disciplined crowd, vocalizing their support for the president. That no matter how much interference the feds and the deep state in Congress and in the media try to tell them to riot, they know that that's not their job. That's not in the American tradition. What's going on NBC? Anything?
In terms of the strategy of
I will note one thing. If early reporting is accurate, that it includes a conspiracy charge, that gives a couple of advantages normally to the prosecutor. Conspiracies can run from a very early date to a very late date. It could encompass a lot of activity, and there is a particular evidentiary value because statements by co-conspirators that are made in furtherance of the conspiracy are admissible at the trial of this particular defendant, Mr. Trump. And so it's a way, legally and ethically, for prosecutors to adduce a lot of evidence. If it really involves other women or other payments, even as part of the conspiracy, it also enables prosecutors to show a pattern of conduct. And the more conduct you can show, the easier it becomes for prosecutors to prove intent.
And again, these liberals telling on themselves that character, that this pattern of behavior is evidence against yourself to commit conspiracy. Not even proof of conspiracy, but attempted conspiracy, which is so broad that even compliance in this arraignment and in this process of being thrown in jail is used as evidence against you, as evidence to commit conspiracy. What conspiracy? Obviously, there's no conspiracy to incite a riot, because the people outside the courthouse are peaceful and well behaved. It's whatever Hitlerite Biden wants it to mean. Complaining about having to be thrown in jail is conspiracy to incite violence. Like, liberals are so. This is why they're pushing the pronoun people to be the face of human rights in America, is because they represent the fragility of the liberal mind, of misgendering someone and getting their pronouns wrong. Gets these people so triggered that they're going out and committing mass shootings, and then those same liberals saying that terrorism is justified. That terrorism is justified for hurting their feelings. That is how soft these people are, and that's why they need Hitlerites like Biden. That is why these anarchists and these pronoun people and all of these soft suburbanite midwits need Biden to become more fascist, is because their sensibilities are getting softer and softer, and so they need that that fascist dictator to crack down on anyone who dares hurt the feelings of the left. Oh yeah, Caleb's been putting out some good content. I appreciate him. His content is never going to have mass appeal. It's kind of boring, but it's always insightful. Yeah, I do appreciate Caleb. I wish he didn't, like, in that CPI event that he helped organize. I wish it didn't involve people like Peter Coffin, like bread tuber Peter Coffin, cringe Peter Coffin. But hey, Caleb himself does good work. Yeah, if you have a link to that video, we could watch that instead of since the mainstream media has made it so that they will have no content in the courtroom while the arraignment goes on. Since we are deprived of a mugshot and courtroom footage, yeah, and we could watch that if you have the link, because NBC and CNN and all of them are depriving us of the memes today. Historical tragedy. Great historical tragedy. Cringe Peter Coffin. Even back when I considered myself a leftist, cringe moment for me, I was watching Peter Coffin and yelling at my laptop just at how insufferable this guy. Peter Coffin single-handedly launched me out of the bread tube pipeline, out of the bread tube psyop, because of how cringe that guy is. I was there for the ContraPoints transing of bread tube, and led down that psyop of the queering of bread tube, and that was not enough to launch me out of that pipeline. Cringe Coffin single-handedly killed me of cringe. I died of cringe. Was resurrected by communist conservatism back in 2020. And so now anything Peter Coffin is associated with, I avoid like the plague. All right, so let's pull up this. I know I haven't acknowledged it at this point, but if you can hear that pump, that generator outside, I do apologize for the for the generator pump. But, all right, let's pull up this stream. God, thank God we have somebody useful at the arraignment. All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Media here, protesters from both sides. So we're going to take a walk. I'll just kind of take you around the area. But this is the courthouse, 100 Center Street. That's where Donald Trump is going to be arraigned. Lots of police here, lots of protesters, lots of people here. So I figure we'll walk over. There's a crowd of Trump supporters, a crowd of opponents of Donald Trump, a whole lot of media. We'll just do a short little stream here, yeah, we'll just take it around. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. I'm going to put my press badge on. And
I need a press badge to go to places like this. I have the graphic for it in my Canva account. I just need to get it printed out and laminated. and just show up to places like this with my hard targets press pass. I'm pretty sure there's nothing you need to apply to get a press pass. You can just print out a piece of paper and laminate it, and that's a press pass. I'm pretty sure. So the fact that I haven't done that yet is a shame on my part.
And yeah, if there's anything people want me to say or whatever, you can shoot me a super chat or whatever you feel like doing. Just putting my press badge on there. I want to make sure that people know that I'm press. And I'm just going to walk around. Maybe we'll try to talk to some protesters, some pro-Trump, some anti-Trump protesters, see what they've got to say. Just an army of media, all those press.
Yeah, the transformation of American police into the IDF means they will shoot you anyway if you are press. They are already doing that in France, like attacking journalists. That's coming here, so press pass isn't going to save you, Caleb.
Tense. Like, and I'll show you how much media there is here. It's ridiculous how much media there is. Well, we're just going to walk around. Just going to walk around. This is, a historic day, I'll say. I mean, this is the first time in history we have ever had a former president face criminal charges. So everything is setting precedent, right? I mean, this is, they had to arrange with the Secret Service how Donald Trump would show up. It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Everything about this is completely like paving new ground. This hasn't happened before. And Donald Trump and his supporters, they are adamant that this is just a legal maneuver, they say, to prevent Donald Trump from running for president once again. So I'm trying to figure out, should we go into let's go into the pro-Trump cage first, just because, it's much bigger in the pro-Trump cage. Earlier, George Santos was in the pro-Trump cage. And then after that, I understand Marjorie Taylor Greene is expected to show up at some point.
Weak leftist crowd in liberal New York, in liberal Antifa-infested New York, in liberal PSL-infected New York. Weak crowd, weak leftist crowd. In the middle of Manhattan, Trump's domain, his Thunderdome, unmatched. Trump in the spirit, in the heart, in the atrium of Manhattan is if DC is the capital, of the United States, then Manhattan and New York City is the atrium, the first and last entry and exit of the lifeblood of the country, the first and last place that people see when they come to America. The representation of that American grandiose spirit of ingenuity and construction. I wasn't expecting that much either. I was hoping, but I wasn't expecting it. But the fact that the crowd is in the thousands and far outnumbers the leftists is very heartening. That Trump really does, even in liberal New York City, him being from New York, really does I think signify that deep psychological ethos that New York, that even in liberal cities, that MAGA ethos is underlying the population and has only ever been hijacked by and has actually the minority of even like liberal cities like New York, and has been hijacked by a very vocal left faction. So it is heartening.
She might already be here. I haven't been at the cage. I've been focused on doing my reporting for RT, and I'm doing hits on RT every hour. So if you want to see updates on the Trump arraignment, tune into RT because that's where I'm reporting from. But yeah, I guess we'll walk around the Trump cage. We'll try to talk to some people, some Trump supporters. And then after that, we'll go into the anti-Trump cage. Then I'll take you over to the press area. You'll just get to see how this works, right? This is kind of behind the scenes, kind of a view of what I'm going to walk through pretty soon. Is someone coming through here pretty soon?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, people think.
Oh, okay. Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to be here soon, so maybe we'll be able to grab Marjorie Taylor Greene here on the screen. That'll be interesting. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she probably wouldn't like me if she met me, but I agree with her about Ukraine. She is 100% right on Ukraine, and no one has been bolder on the Ukraine stuff than her. She's like, why are we spending weapons to Ukraine when mothers in the United States can't get baby formula? That's pretty cool. I mean, I when it comes to foreign policy, I'm more with Marine than any of the liberals. They're all war hawks. They all want to send weapons. But yeah, we're gonna walk around the cage here, interview some pro-Trump folks, go to the other cage, interview some other people. We'll just do what we got to do. So yeah, here I'll show you. camera around there. Looks like there's a procession ready. It looks like they're expecting Marjorie Taylor Greene to arrive. That's why the press is all lined up here like they are. So yeah, look at this. I mean, there's just an army of cameras here. I mean, it's wild. It is really, really wild how much press coverage there is here. But this is the pro-Trump area. Like I said, George Santos was here. He made a brief appearance. Yeah, this is going to be pretty wild. So there we go.
All of those press people there and the deep state doing everything. Doing everything to deprive us of newsworthy moments. Doing everything to make sure this arraignment goes down in silence, despite the 30-year-long precedent we have of a 24-hour news cycle happening inside of courtrooms. Tragedy.
There we go. But yeah.
Oh, and just to jump off of what Caleb was saying about Marjorie Taylor Greene, like him agreeing more with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, I mean the 10 MAGA people in the House and the Senate, like the vocal MAGA minority in the Republican Party, that is what like the Trotskyist left wants to be. They wish they wish they had a faction as effective and as popular and as representative of the popular will as Matt Gaetz, as Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the 10 or so MAGA people in the House and the Senate that are actually pushing back against the Zionist uniparty, the globalist imperial machine. Like, yeah, like those I forget the names of the other 8, but like those people who are actually challenging that uniparty stranglehold of American politics is, yeah, I mean, it's just proof that the MAGA movement is where an actually revolutionary platform is going to come from, where an actually counter-hegemonic platform is going to come from, where 10 people could have the kind of effect that we see. That it's not like materially, it's not. Yeah, materially, it's not that force it because there's a small faction. It's not that material force, but in terms of pushing their narrative and pushing the MAGA narrative is extraordinarily effective. Where where the House Speaker, the Speaker of the House, has to like concede to a lot of their concessions because even the threat of them like not voting was such a wrench in this deep state machinery.
See if we can find a pro-Trump person to talk to us. Somebody with a sign.
Oh, okay.
Can you give us some comments for YouTube?
Some comments for YouTube. Yes, God bless President Trump, and may God damn Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and every leftist Soros puppet that is making a mockery of our Constitution. I don't care who you are politically, what side of the spectrum, what they're doing to a former president of the United States.
Yes.
It's a shame. It's a disgrace. There's countries around the world that look to us as that light in the world, and we are being made a mockery of. And all these people who came here legally that wanted to be a U.S. citizen, they're coming here and they're saying, how can we have the American dream when American citizens themselves that are born and raised here are being persecuted politically and thrown in gulags in D.C. for January 6th? God bless President Trump.
This lady looks like what the spirit of Colombia, like the woman representation of America as a country. She looks like that, right? With like the wavy blonde hair. This is what the spirit of America looks like. Is this blonde Colombia?
God bless America, and goddamn everyone, foreign and domestic, who are enemies of this United States of America.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Foreign and domestic.
I'm American. Diane, where are you from?
God
From
bless you,
Brooklyn.
Diane. God bless you, Diane. Love you.
All right.
All MAGA people are that powerful. Just a first rando from the crowd And they all talk like that. The most advanced segment of the population is the MAGA crowd.
Well, she didn't beat around the bush, did she? So there you go. Yeah, there you go. Didn't beat around the bush. But
our biggest success is that this city has ever known a self-made billionaire, Donald J.
Yes, keep going, Diane!
Trump, who made it all the way to the presidency without the help of any of these establishment rhinos. He made it to the presidency, and here he comes back to his hometown to be indicted on bogus charges while Greg is allowing all these criminals to beat, rape, and kill people. Let cops be beaten, top cars blown up, and Mayor Adams has the gall, the audacity.
Based Diane cannot be stopped. MAGA partisans are the auxiliary. It is the year of the ox, as my Twitter name will reveal. 2023 is the year of the auxiliary, year of the ox. Follow me on Twitter, by the way. Why didn't I put my Twitter handle in the comments section? If for posterity, for the people watching. For when another 12 people decide to watch this stream later on.
To say we should be peaceful, we're not the ones who started. They do. We just finished it.
Yes!
Tom Blake.
If you had one right now,
all right.
I would say
See if we can.
very much, Mr. President. God bless you. I can't wait to vote for you again in 2024.
All right. We're just going to keep walking around here. Keep walking around. We're in the pro-Trump area. Like I said, they said that Marjorie Taylor Greene might be showing up. You know, we'll see how that goes. So there we go. There we go. Yeah, I'm going to see if there's an order we can talk to. The woman didn't seem like she really wanted to talk. She was just kind of grandstanding. As soon as she finished her thing, she walked away. I was hoping I could find someone who wanted to talk. Trumper, you know, that would be pretty cool. So.
I mean, okay, and that's where I have to criticize Caleb a little bit. Let them grandstand. Like, they've been demonized for 2 years, thrown in jail. Let them grandstand. Was she wrong though? Like, yes. It needs to be a conversation. But like our job is to make is to make sure that we are the servants of the masses. If they want to grandstand and they are correct, let them grandstand. It is our necessary function to give them a platform. We should not exist to platform ourselves. We should exist to platform that grandstanding. Yeah, like Diane doesn't have her own YouTube channel. She needs one. It is our responsibility to allow Diane to grandstand, to push Diane thought into the world.
I hold up now and punch you in the face. Even though there's 40,000 hours.
You're here to what's America.
Of course, it's this vest, teacup glasses wearing, mustachioed hipster threatening MAGA people, getting up in their face. It is this asshole who is the cause of rioting. It is this asshole who is leading the French riots. This asshole, this hipster, this asshole does not represent the majority of New York City or the country. Not even of New York City, not even of Manhattan. This hipster Hitler. Hitler is going to look like this. The next Hitler is going to look like this. Too long this and all of the hipster Hitlerites like this have been grandstanding. And I'm sick of them grandstand. What is that coat? What is that Jack Sparrow ass coat? What is this conquistador facial hair, John Lennon sunglasses, Jack Sparrow coats look? Like, those glasses must have cost at least $400. That coat must have cost like at least twice that amount. I bet he doesn't even like shave his sparse facial hair by himself to get the conquistador look, to get the emaciated Cortez look. Like he has to go to a high end boutique barber shop, because that's where he got every other part of this look. Fuck this guy.
Are you agitating now? Are you agitating now?
We said we were there in trouble, and you folks saw they were trying to tell us to break the law.
Okay, well,
So why is that not?
so you think that Antifa infiltrated and caused the Trump supporters to go wild?
Everybody
Go
knows.
on.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows.
Everybody knows it.
Listen to them. Everybody knows it. The actual working class of this country, the actual representative supermajority of this country knows. Empirically, we have gathered up the evidence and with our eyes. You're telling us to disbelieve our eyes.
The police let them in.
These police and fucking these cops are crazy.
You don't. You won't.
Get the police. Get the police right
You're
there.
trying to
This
incite.
guy's he's trying to make
I'm speaking the truth.
He's making shots.
You people want Americans
You are
going down
here
the toilet.
trying to get Trump supporters angry.
Where's the police?
You're already angry and agitated.
But who's calling that? Seriously?
You actually, you are calling you called me
Get
an
back.
agitator with
Get
no
back.
fucking evidence.
Get back.
That's
Get
worse.
back.
What
Get back.
did you just call me?
Get back.
Seriously?
Going an argument between we have the
It's that leftist lunatic. They know every day I appreciate MAGA more and understand the Warhawk sentiment is not the majority. Like that. It's that hipster who is begging that Biden gets more fascistic, begging Biden to jail political opponents and to sweep the cities with National Guard, to sweep through the urban ghettos with the National Guard, to impose a dictatorship of the urban Hitlerite liberal, because they are the minority and because they're so soft. It was that guy who was triggered just by being around like people who are exercising their First Amendment right to assemble, and who aren't even being rude, who are genuinely friendly and inviting and strong-willed. This frightens them more than anything. So of course they need a military dictatorship of the Biden type Hitlerism to protect their minority enclaves in Flatbush and in Greenwich Village. Like the National Guard isn't going to be sweeping through Greenwich Village, where that Jack Sparrow looking motherfucker lives.
the stream back, so we'll keep walking. I want to interview different people, just hear different people's perspective. This is the Trump supporter area. Seems like there's plenty of anti-Trump people here that are getting in people's faces and arguing with them, but this is the designated area for Trump supporters. So long I have to do my hits, but I have to do my hit for the next hour for RT, but I'm going to keep walking around, right? I want to talk to a Trump supporter. This will be good. Very good. Very, very good. There we are, right? Just walking around. Yeah, I mean, the connection is bad, I think, because there's just so many people streaming here right now. I think it's some conspiracy. I just think there's just so much going on in the world now that it's pretty wild. I'm going to interview this guy, see what this is. Hey. Oh, I'm Uber. This is my YouTube channel, but I'm a reporter. I also work with RT from Russia. That's my job, but I'm here just kind of streaming. What is Salem 1692 Bragg 2023? What is that? Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's similar to the Salem witch trials. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Some of the people I've been talking to that are opposing Trump, they say that they know it's lawfare. They know it's an attempt. They're okay with that. What do you make of that when people say stuff like that?
I think Bragg remarkably, when he ran for office, he said he was running for office, he got the record very NKVD head, uncertification, unstoppable. And his most famous phrase in his life was, "Show me the man and I'll show you the cross." So Bragg ran for office saying, "Only identify people who want to find crime, cases,
Interesting. Well, yeah, certainly an interesting crowd here. I'm just going around interviewing people. I'll probably head over to that cage in a little bit, but I know Marjorie Taylor Greene is supposed to be here. It's pretty wild because the left, the socialists, the left, they used to be the one who opposed the FBI. They used to be the ones who opposed the wars. But now it's people like Donald Trump who are saying they didn't want to get us into new wars. It was people like Trump who went up against the FBI. And the so-called, they're all about censorship. They're all about FBI repression. They're all about sending more weapons to Ukraine while our country's getting poorer. It seems like there's a flip. What do you think of that?
Everything you just said is true. The FBI don't know that it once was, and hopefully that's something others like can get in there and straighten it out.
All right, very good. Well, talk to you soon. All right, good luck. All right, Marjorie Taylor Greene is now arriving. So here comes Marjorie Taylor Greene. There we go. Here comes MTG. Marjorie Taylor Greene is entering with crowds and crowds of media behind her. What the ruckus is, they're going to let her in through the gates, actually. That's interesting. So, yeah, we're now the media is assembled around these gates.
Welcome to MAGA hero, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene!
Go back to Georgia! You're bad for America! You're bad for America! Go back to Georgia!
Woo!
Go back to the country! Go back to Georgia! You low-life you individuals! Your eyes are
All right. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is in the house. There's no way close enough to see Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I'm going to leave this area so we can keep doing, because there's no way we're going to get anywhere near Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'll just tell you that much. And, I getting away from the area, but that's the ruckus was Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's pretty wild. I'm heading the other way. There's no way we're going to get nothing. This is pretty wild.
That's a shame. Man, I don't agree 100% with, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but, she is amongst the MAGA crowd. Will she remain a steadfast cadre of the MAGA movement? Probably not. She really kowtowed early on to, McCarthy when he was first being put up as, the Speaker of the House, but still would have been good. She's always good for a viral moment. This event needs more viral moments. We are being deprived of the memes. We are being deprived of the content. There is a grand conspiracy to deprive us of content. Like the best American historical moments always had memeable content. There were always memes. Boston Tea Party, when they dressed up as Mohicans before throwing all of the containers of tea into the Boston Harbor. Memeable moments. QAnon shaman moments. Crossing of the Rubicon, memeable moments. And the deep state is depriving us of the content, of the immortal content that will come out of this event, that will make the American spirit stronger, despite the attacks on the system of democracy and popular will, the spirit of the working class. We will not let the deep state deprive us of the content. Oh, yeah, I'm going to. This is sudden, but I'm going to switch over the live stream since we can't see Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I don't really want to see anyone in the leftist camp. Here is Alvin Bragg giving a statement, which I really am.
Formed in 2017. This simply was not true. And it was a false statement that the defendant made month after month in 2017. April, May, June, and so on through the rest of the year. For 9 straight months, the defendant held documents in his hand containing this key lie, that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. And he personally signed checks for payments to Michael Cohen for each of these 9 months. In total, the grand jury found there were 34 documents with this critical false statement.
Is that where they're getting the 34?
Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements?
Must be.
The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election.
Committed no crime.
Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election.
Not illegal.
As part of this,
even if that were true, it's not illegal. Even if that were true, which is a lie on his part, like Rupert Murdoch was against Trump in 2015. A. B. The original indictment was for a non-disclosure agreement, which is not like a catch and kill. God, I can't deal with the lies, with the fantasy. I'm so mad that the indictment is so lame. I'm so mad that they couldn't have cooked up a better fantasy, because this is so lame. A non-disclosure agreement that now has become a catch and kill. They have to put the word kill in there just to give it the illusion of being a real crime.
Scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies. And Hunter
Biden's laptop that story being suppressed by the FBI, like pre-bunking being a Minority Report level dystopian turn of events. That's a catch and kill story. Not only should Hunter Biden have to face the consequences of the disgusting contents of that laptop, but all of the FBI agents who were involved in pre-bunking and all of the media who helped gaslight the entire country. That's a catch and kill conspiracy.
And they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer.
Stormy, believe
That
all
payment
women, Daniel.
was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap. And the false statements in AMI's books.
That was his personal
violated
money, by the way. All money paid to Stormy Daniels was out of Trump's own pocket.
New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements.
Watch me get flagged for misinformation and not the Washington Post.
About his payments to Mr. Cohen. He could not simply say that the payments were a reimbursement for Mr. Cohen's payments to Stormy Daniels. To do so, to make that true statement, would have been to admit a crime. So instead, Mr. Trump said that he was paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. And in order to get Michael Cohen his money back, they planned one last false statement. In order to complete the scheme, they planned to mischaracterize the repayments to Mr. Cohen as income to the New York State tax authorities. The conduct I just described and that which was charged by the grand jury is felony criminal conduct in New York State. True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a
financial
history.
center of global finance monopolies. The financial rat's nest of corruption and Wall Street dark money. The fact that Trump comes from Manhattan and was embroiled in the real estate market and had 11 million pages worth of business records where nothing came up on this guy is astounding. Astounding. We're talking about a group of people who force new members to commit crimes, sex crimes, or worse, to have blackmail on each other. We're talking about people who groom the kids of each other's associates in Ivy League fraternities, like this lifelong process of turning these people into psychopaths. And Trump has no actual dirt on him other than this alleged misdemeanor that they're turning into a federal charge. And 11 million documents surrounded by the most vile human beings on the actual most vile human beings on earth, the most disgusting, depraved, psychopathic individuals on planet Earth. Nothing. That was his crime. That was his crime, was not participating in that web of pagan Satanism.
In the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. And fraud presents itself in all different forms.
That's the other
here in
crime.
Manhattan.
when he says, the backbone of white collar work. That's the other crime going on here is Trump refused to allow this entire sector of the economy, this mid-wit layer, this insulating layer of the ruling class, this white collar midwit bureaucrat layer. He just refused to cater to them. And now that AI is making all of them functionally obsolete, they're out for blood. Like those white collar, like yeah, artificial intelligence is revealing who is going to be on either side of the next civil war. The next civil war is going to be these white collar, pencil neck, effeminate, feckless men versus the corn-fed Kansas boys, the heart and soul of the American countryside, the MAGA Mecca proletariat, who cannot be replaced, who will refuse to submit being replaced by the service economy, by the white collar bureaucrat. That was Trump's other crime, is catering to them.
We've charged falsifying business records for those who violated federal bank secrecy laws. We have charged falsifying business records for those who were seeking to cover up sex crimes. And we have brought this charge for those...
What sex crimes? Every other sentence. What sex crimes? Hunter Biden is a pedophile. Joe Biden is a pedophile. What sex crimes? Even if Trump had an illicit affair, that's not illegal. What sex crimes? Go after the public list of people who went to Epstein Island. I cannot. Liberal hypocrisy is unbelievable.
Tax filing.
The people who champion the science to push fascist dictatorship on you and to change your very genetics are so removed from reality, it borders on the schizophrenic.
At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power.
Go after
changes
Hillary
that
Clinton.
Enduring American principle.
Go after
I'll now
Biden.
take questions.
We're going to take a limited number of questions. There are no follow-up questions. One question per reporter. I will call on you. And again, we have limited time. Thank you. The first question will be Rick. Thank you for giving us a CNN. Why now? I mean, some argue that this is a political move. You're not going to be a political person. If Rick is going to go into
We conducted a thorough and rigorous investigation, as we're known to do, at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I've been doing this for 24 years and am no stranger to rigorous, complex investigations. I bring cases when they're ready. Having now conducted a rigorous, thorough investigation, the case was ready to be brought, and it was brought.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And it would
The case was ready. The case was ready to be brought forward after DeSantis's poll numbers tanked because he's such a sniveling weirdo. That's when the indictment magically gets brought forward. Oh, and this alleged misdemeanor gets turned into a federal offense because the statute of limitations for a misdemeanor, which is 2 years, was over because the hush money had been paid in the alleged hush money had been paid in 2016, and so the statute of limitations was over for a misdemeanor, and so he had to magically this misdemeanor changed into a federal offense. Oh, but it's fine because he's been in the business of doing nothing for 24 years. None of these people. They're so bitter that they have to be dragged into the limelight to bring their sweaty, goblin-ass faces into the limelight to talk to crowds. They have been dragged out of their air-conditioned offices, out of their $800 ergonomic swivel chairs, to be, to have to now drum up enough talking points to fill an hour's worth of TV. They're willing to torture people and to execute people to avoid, at all costs, having to talk to other human beings.
Does not say what those crimes were. We are assuming perhaps that they might be election related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also broken.
Right. So let me say as an initial matter that the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my
Even
remarks,
mainstream media is not going along with this lie. Like, being very careful to say that these assumed crimes, and asking this someone who's been a lawyer for 24 years, asking him what laws did Trump break. Granted, they're not going to push so hard that it's going to invalidate this whole circus. But even they are having a hard time following the flimsy narrative that Alvin Bragg and his George Soros-led team have strung together.
A couple of laws, which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means.
There's that word conspiracy.
I further
again.
indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities.
You can bet that George Soros had explicitly requested the word conspiracy be used, because that's the second time that word has come up, and it didn't come up before in previous weeks. I don't remember the word conspiracy coming up in the indictment process, but now it's popping up a couple of times in these live feeds. So that was a request from Soros, you can rest assured.
I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why wasn't he charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberate process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that.
But you have no process.
In the law.
You were told by George Soros and your deep state masters to drum up charges. Let me tell you how stupid this guy is. He didn't use charges of conspiracy and any of the other charges because he was too stupid to think of them weeks and weeks ago. Because he had to be told by his handlers to bring that stuff up a few days before the arraignment. Because the best him and his team could come up with all that George Soros money, that $1 million of George Soros money, was this Stormy Daniels nonsense. And that fantasy was so flimsy that all of his handlers are just behind the scenes. You can guarantee that they're telling him to put more charges on him because the other stuff's not going to stick. Like, this guy who's been in law for 24 years was too stupid to think of conspiracy and any of the other, 34 indictments brought against Trump. These people serve no function. They serve no formal function, not even to the ruling class. They just exist as insulation, as filler, as cardboard cutouts to make it look like there is a formal process of administration and governance going on and law. They just exist to sit in offices all day and ignore the world around them and just exist. To not have any responsibility other than not doing something stupid in public. And this guy is, which is why this guy is so is so bitter to be and sweating in front of a camera, because it's not his job to speak in public, even though he's been in a public speaking job for 24 years. That's not his real job. He's real estate, is what he is. That's the best way I can put it. Alvin Bragg is human real estate, whose value goes up over time the more his office collects more prestige. He doesn't do anything. He serves no function, merely to increase the legitimacy, the image of legitimacy for the deep state. He is mental real estate, legal real estate.
Is the basis for those decisions.
Hi, you had expressed a year ago that you had some reservations about the case's readiness. Can you talk to us about what were some of the questions in your mind that needed to be answered in order to bring a case of this magnitude?
I'm not going to go chapter and verse into any thinking. What I will say is, I believe the time period you're talking about, I'd been in office for a couple of months. The investigation, in my view, was not concluded into the conduct in particular that is the basis for the charges today. Since that time, we've had more evidence made available to the office and opportunity to meet with additional witnesses. So as I said earlier, I've been doing this for 24 years. I don't bring cases prior to a thorough and rigorous investigation. Now, having done so, the case has been brought.
Mr. Bragg, Garrett Hake with NBC News. Your predecessor took a hard look at
this
case.
He doesn't actually do anything. The fact that he has to justify that the 24 years statement and not speak to the specifics of this case, the most important case of his life that he half-assed because he doesn't actually know how to do his job. He's a diversity and inclusion hire. Like all of those people who were fired, who were the first to go when the economy started to take a turn, because because our corporate masters don't actually care about diversity and inclusion. They're just human real estate to increase the value of companies and offices to investors like BlackRock and Soros. They don't do anything. They're not smart. They're not talented. They have no skills. They're not good at public speaking. Everyone in Biden's cabinet is the same. All of the especially anyone who fills a diversity slot has never done anything significant in their lives. They're just real estate. Just a vanishing illusion of compassion and representation. They're just cardboard cutouts of people.
And decided not to charge it. Federal prosecutors took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Do you believe you have new evidence that led you to decide to charge this, or why now?
Well, as I just mentioned, we have had available to the office additional
evidence
the
mainstream
that was
media
not in
is
the office's
baffled.
possession prior to my time here.
There's nothing
and
here.
As to your part of your question about the federal, we have a distinct and strong, I would say profound, independent interest in New York State. This is the business capital of the world.
Profound.
Regularly to cases
Profound.
involving false
Alvin
business
Bragg
statements.
is so profound right now.
The bedrock, in fact, the basis for
When I think of
business
profound
integrity and a well-functioning business marketplace is true and accurate record keeping. That's the charge that's brought here, falsifying
Alvin
New York
Bragg.
State business records.
When I think of civil rights leaders, the profoundness of a Martin Luther King or an MLK, an MLK or a Malcolm X, I would put Alvin Bragg up on that Mount Rushmore of profound Black leaders. I wouldn't be surprised if Alvin Bragg was also gay. Would not be surprised. Because of how profound he is. Like the class of bureaucrats who either have no neck at all or too much neck. There's two types of bureaucrats: pencil necks and ham necks. But Alvin Bragg is the exception. What a profound individual. So regal that his glasses are held up onto his head by the fat on his temples. That if he had no ears, his glasses would still stay up because the meat around his skull is just pushing up against the frames. The regal, refined quality of an Alvin Bragg with his busted lineup and his weird goatee. Someone with that round of a head made the brave decision to have an even rounder goatee. The plump deep state, the deep fried state. The Kentucky deep fried state.
Thank you, DA Brad. I'm just going to read back one line from your statement facts. The participants also took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of payments and furtherance of the scheme. You allege former President Trump was one of the participants who mischaracterized the payments for tax purposes.
I'm not going to go beyond the plain language statement of facts, which I think speaks for itself.
Brad, can you please comment on the strength of the evidence that Trump personally intended violating state election law, including actions that are charged in the indictment?
So the charge is falsifying business records. The charge requires, as I specified, criminal conduct that was concealed.
I would be having like popcorn or something, but it's still Ramadan. You know, I can't actually eat anything until for a few more hours. Otherwise, I'd have like my salsa and chips, my jalapeno popcorn, something. But yeah, that's what I was gonna say. These other journalists are doing his job for him. Did you notice that? They're asking, why didn't you charge him with conspiracy? Or why didn't you charge him with a tax evasion? That seems like legit. Why didn't you charge him with the? And he said, "Oh, we're not gonna go into that. I don't want to go into the meat and potatoes of it. I don't want to go into the meat and potatoes of the actual charges because he didn't think of them. Because Alvin Bragg was too stupid after 24 years in law to think of those things himself. The media is now on the fly having to do his job for him. That is how useless this individual is. It is astounding to me. Astounding that the media, whose job it is to fluff up and magnify nothing stories like this, are desperate to find some meat on the bone here for this claim. When all of these hipsters, like we saw at the protest outside the courthouse, are foaming at the mouth, saying is real, that this is a real crime, that no one is above the law, that Trump is a criminal and should be in jail for life for what? For what exactly? Oh, we're not going to go into the details of my plain fact statement. There were no plain facts in your statement. This is now we have people going to jail now for memes. This is the lack of substance. This is the foundation of how people will now be sent to jail. And they still are clinging to this idea that they need to look legitimate while they do it. But there's no substance at all for why our family members are sitting in jail. There's no purpose for it other than to solidify their control of a dying empire, of a dying bubble of finance and real estate. That is why, like, 1,000 people from January 6th are in jail. That is why, like, our friends and family are in jail. For that decrepit swamp to cling to a few last minutes of life. They're not smart enough, their cronies aren't smart enough to think of a legitimate sounding excuse for why 1,000 people are in jail, for why the former president of the United States is heading to jail as we speak. Something so out of the ordinary, so worthy of 500 news organizations coming to like Manhattan and thousands of Trump supporters congregating in one place, something so historic. And there's nothing behind it. No content. No validation. Just air. It's all the more insulting that our opponents think so little of of the country that they live in. That is how little they think of the common man. As they sit in their high rises, pulling in six-figure salaries, while the rest of us can barely afford to buy groceries. They have no loyalty to any part of your existence. They have no compassion for your struggle. They have no will to make themselves accountable, to even play the part. They just want to continue languishing in their degenerate lifestyles. And the fringe wing of leftist lunatics in the streets, the Antifa pronoun people in the streets, are an extension of that languishing and that degeneracy. Merely an extension of a deeper sickness. Yes, like the Antifa types and the PSL, Trotskyists, the anarchists, the degenerates, the pagans. Yes, they are a very small faction of the American population. But they're foot soldiers of an even smaller, even sicker faction. And that is people like Alvin Bragg, who is himself just a house Negro for the lizards in Washington.
The concealed crimes we allege is New York State election law. I sort of went through in our statement of facts, which I think many of you have in front of you, goes through things including text messages, emails, contemporaneous phone records, multiple witnesses. All of that will be, as you saw in the fall, borne out in a public courtroom in downtown Manhattan.
Last question is Jonah.
So, yeah, correct. The charges related to the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, the release from your office, also mentions another woman, Karen McDougal, as well as a doorman. Can you comment on how those players are related to the charges you've brought, or to the case overall?
It's a I'm glad you put your finger on that, because it's not just about one payment. It is 34 business records.
So yeah, it looks like the press interview. I'm skipping ahead a bit. It looks like it was almost over. There's nothing really more to it, which is a shame, because you expect there to be a light bulb moment for anyone in the room. Because if I understand that that this shit is, that you can't publish this, that this if I were a journalist in that room, I would be sweating bullets. And I appreciate the off-topic question. We'll get to it. I just wanted to close on that last bit. I would be sweating bullets if I was a mainstream media journalist in that room. What story is there to publish? What footage is there to publish? What content is there? I joke about it. But there needs to be content for people to tune in, for them to, like, relevant details for them to grasp onto. Details make up a story. Without details, you have a memo. You have a plot synopsis on the back of a DVD case. There is so little here to fill in the blanks that the journalists were desperate to fill in the blanks for Alvin Bragg, saying, why can't you add tax evasion to the charges? Why can't you add conspiracy? Why can't you do this? Can you give us something? Can you give us any bit of content? Anything. We're not allowed inside the courtroom. We can't be filming for people's reactions. We can't get the viral mugshot that we've been desperate for, because our news organizations are floundering for ratings and for views. This is the most historic thing that has happened in 3 years since the January 6th riot, which we've been milking for 3 years, and we have nothing to show for it. Give us something, Alvin Bragg. Our jobs are at risk. AI is stealing our jobs. Elon Musk just took the blue check off of the New York Times Twitter account. Give us something, Alvin Bragg. The media sector of the deep state is dying. And you are putting the last few shovelfuls of dirt over our graves. Please, Mr. Alvin Bragg, profound Alvin Bragg, say something profound for us to close out on, so we can have some form of content to give to our masters, so that we will not lose our jobs to ChatGPT. Once ChatGPT is plugged into Google search and into Twitter conversations, and can do reporting jobs for us. That's what's coming. Don't you see, Alvin? The AI organized stream of content is already poised to replace us. And there is no final word. The whole affair, the whole circus goes out with a whimper. So that is the ultimate tragedy of this whole Roman circus. Being deprived of the means. But we must persist. So you're saying, what kind of changes in the U.S. do you think? Yeah, it's just to move completely off topic, because now that I'm 100% sure, now I really do hope that Trump flies back to Mar-a-Lago to give a speech. I hope to God there's got to be something today. There's got to be something. If I were Trump, I would feel, and I saw that there were no cameras in the courthouse, and and I leave the courthouse, and I'm asking my assistants, like, what kind of things are they saying about me, and I was seeing the desert of content on every media YouTube page right now. I would feel obligated to fly to Mar-a-Lago to make a speech. I would be personally insulted. My manhood would be attacked. That my moment of martyrdom was being taken from me by the ineptitudes of the deep state. So, what kind of changes in the U.S. do you think the new BRICS currency will have? I saw an interesting take the other day that the death of domestic finance the death of international finance is the potential for the rebirth of American manufacturing, that because the inverse has been true. The death of American manufacturing was brought about by America overseeing the Bretton Woods system and the rise of the American dollar, specifically the petrodollar, in international trade. Because the value of the dollar is propped up by cheap petroleum extracted from the Saudis, we're not incentivized to extract and produce oil from our own shores, because it would be more expensive to produce. We'd have to pay more for the labor. So we are incentivized to de-industrialize our own energy and then outsource that energy from the Saudis, which we did in 1979, I believe, after Nixon brought the gold standard, divorced the dollar from the gold standard. It was then reattached onto Saudi Arabian oil, killing our own oil industry. And the same is true for all other forms of American manufacturing. Why would we have domestic manufacturing in which we would be paying higher labor costs when we could outsource manufacturing to China and be paying much, much lower labor costs and increasing our profits and increasing our financial investments? That is the clear choice you would make if you were a finance capitalist, if you were a banker, if you were any of these parasitic ruling class types. So the decoupling of all of these major BRICS countries, BRICS now has a larger share of the world economy than the G7 economies. It's only about 1% right now, but that is still a watershed moment where the other poles of global power have numeric proof that they are mightier than the liberal unipolar order. Because BRICS economies are on the rise. G7 economies are on the decline because they have nothing propping them up but finance. So this will speed along the death of the dollar. But the death of the dollar, because people won't be holding it as much. People won't be, other countries won't be holding reserves of the dollar as much to do trade. And so the value of the dollar will decrease because demand will decrease. Demand will decrease at the same time as they need to print the dollar in the trillions to be able to pay off the deficit by this June. The government needs to pay off this $30 trillion deficit by June. There's not enough money to do that. They could either tell all of the boomers that they have no Social Security anymore, that they're going to eat up Social Security to pay the deficit, or they could turn on the money printer. They could, I guess they could raise taxes by 500%. It caused like a 1776 series of tax rebellions. But or they could turn on the money printer. So supply of the dollar will go up while demand for the dollar is going down. It signals a major red flag for the value of the dollar. But the death of the dollar means that we will now be able to invest in domestic manufacturing, specifically in the American Southwest. Texas and California are the two largest GDPs in the country by a huge margin. There's no close third place. New York is third, and it's not close. But that's because New York is propped up by like these airy bubbles of real estate and banking, whereas Texas is propped up by petroleum, and California, again, by a lot of these airy tech shit. But there's a lot of meat there. There's I believe it's 1/6 of the country's agricultural products come from California, which is obscene. That's like an obscene amount of food coming out of one place. So you have agriculture and petroleum. Texas also having a lot of, I think, beef, if I remember correctly. But like real economies, that if the American dollar suddenly tanked and there was like a Weimar Republic type scramble, there'd still be industry to invest in, to catalyze, to bring down the threat of inflation, because manufacturing lowers inflation. Increasing manufacturing lowers inflation because you're increasing the labor power, the labor power that is producing all of these goods, driving down increasing the number of goods and driving down the price. I guess you could also just like automate everything and deflate the price that way. I need to brush up on the economics of it, but it's going to be a tough time for sure, because like the incentives that we have, that we've internalized for decades and decades of investing in manufacturing, in good working class jobs, has eroded for much of the population. That we consider it beneath us to work in manual labor. So again, it's going to be a struggle for sure, but it's going to signal like a real shift towards like self-sufficiency that we haven't seen since since the Reconstruction era, really, since over 100 years, over like 130, 140 years. So that's the most immediate change that we will probably see by the end of this year, depending on how this debt situation goes in June, whether or not the dollar will be killed quickly or slowly. And that's more a thing. That's something I can be pretty certain about. The more speculative consequences of the more speculative consequences of BRICS pairing their currencies, I think we're going to see more regional blocks. Like Russia and China forming an alliance. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I want to see it in South America. I really do. Brazil and Argentina bringing up conversations again to have a joint currency is exciting, but ultimately is not like that's happened many times throughout the decades. Is Brazil and Argentina, the two largest South American economies, talking about creating a joint currency? So the likelihood of it happening this time is low, but the dream is still alive. solidifying a block through a shared currency. So the possibility for that to happen all over the place now like goes up. If the 21st century belongs to China, we could see a shared currency for a Chinese bloc, or for the Gulf states. After Israel collapses and dies from this impending civil war and is taken over by Greater Syria, we could see an economic bloc, a shared currency of the Gulf states, to bring them into a permanent unity and economic cooperation. That is, I think that is. I don't know what that's going to look like, again, because it's speculative. But it's a trend that it's a noticeable trend. If we're getting really speculative, and in the realm of basically of science fiction, so the 21st century at this point belongs to China, indisputably. The 22nd century, so 80 years from now, is going to belong to Africa. Africa has all of the demographic potential, has the most, it's the most resource-rich continent on the planet, and a century of Chinese leadership of a multipolar world order will finally allow Africa the time to develop that it has not had in 600 years. Africa just being suppressed for the past 600 years means that once that cancerous system finally is put to bed, that the most resource rich, the most demographically diverse, and the second largest continent, and with the youngest population, which still has yet to industrialize. Once they unify, the next century is going to belong completely to Africa, I believe. That the dream that Muammar Gaddafi was was so ahead of his time. He was 100 years ahead of his time. And that starts with things like shared currencies. And that's why in the 20th century, I think it was in the 20th century, that Swahili was being made a lingua franca of much of the African continent, was to create institutions and systems of unity between a very diverse and very divided people. Currency is another rational form of that. So definitely going to see that in Eurasia. Hopefully we'll see that in South America, though with the way Brazil is going, with Lula acting as a wedge for BRICS, maybe we'll see it, maybe we won't. So that's more medium-term effects that we'll see with these new BRICS currency pairings. I don't know. I want to say that, and going back to American manufacturing for a second, I want to say that obviously, the rise of domestic industry, or the rebirth of American industry. We know it's going to be painful. I would like to say, this is the last thing I'll say on the matter. I would like to say that it would just be painful because, in the way that exercise is painful, that it would be the pain of growth and labor. That it would be the sacrifice of having to go without so that you could produce more for your fellow man. I would say, if I were being idealistic, that would be the only struggle we would have to face. But I don't think that's the case, knowing that empires do not die quickly. They die very slowly and piecemeal. That the deep state will not go quietly into that good night. If the alliance between Russia and China proves to be too strong, where American production of the war machine is kind of like, I mean, it's already fruitless in Ukraine. They know that. If the pivot to China does not work out, and we do not want it to work out, even if they started producing all of these war machines, like naval ships, aircraft, updating all of the machinery, restocking all of the supplies of anti-aircraft equipment to supply to Taiwan, even if they do all of that, catching up to China is a losing game if our economy dies. So if we are successful in stopping World War III with China, my theory, and this is another confirmed conspiracy as touted by deep state spooks like Peter Zion, who I follow to get an ear to the ground of what the deep state is planning. A domestic pivot to war is also in the works as a backup plan with Mexico. All of the equipment that we have accumulated over the past 20 years in a forever war with Afghanistan are only suited to throw into a graveyard similar to our equipment that we threw into the Ukrainian graveyard into Mexico, into the mountainous desert regions of North Mexico. So if the deep state can't resupply and update the military, then they will throw the corpse of that military at the Mexican people in order to secure the oldest and largest colony of the United States, which is a grim reality, but one that I can't see us one that I can't see us moving away from, because I personally believe that it is the historical destiny for the North American continent to unify into a single federation. If it wants to avoid collapsing into the Stone Age, that will have to happen. But the only way that the current regime knows how to organize is through occupation, through war, to synthesize two groups by crashing them against each other until one of them is or both of them is destroyed, to secure a labor force from the Mexican people who is only now just having their own baby boom, to supply enough people to populate the American Southwest, to get resources like agricultural products, wood, fresh water comes from Chiapas. It was one of the most water rich resources in the world. Petroleum. We get like a significant amount of our petroleum from Mexico. I don't see them being genuine in the spirit of a self-sufficient American population. I see them only like having that last grasp at finance capital being propped up by war and colonialism by pivoting to a Mexican theater of war. We already see this with rhinos like Lindsey Graham and Senator, what's his name, the one with the eye patch, eye patch Dan Crenshaw, eye patch Dan Crenshaw, making overt threats to invade, or covert threats to invade, but overt signals of aggression to Mexico. Again, it's a backup plan for the war machine, for the military-industrial complex, and ultimately the beginning of an American Civil War. I think the catalyst for an American Civil War that people like Dmitry Medvedev had signaled at the beginning of this year, the secession of California and Texas to join Mexico, which, now that AMLO has said he has threatened to do, to like influence the elections of Mexico and California, and influence the heavy Mexican populations there. Secession is a very real threat. Even the threat of it is enough to cause military conflict, because that's a very big threat to American legitimacy. What little there is of it, of the democratic institutions. So yeah, it's a very real possibility that we think it's in some far off future, but we're seeing the groundwork for it being made. And again, with the recent news that the American government wants to reclassify drug cartels in Mexico as international terrorist organizations, which would give them legal authority to invade Mexico in order to suppress these cartels. So organizations which were created, trained, funded, armed by the CIA would, be the catalyst for an invasion from the U.S. military. So we're seeing this groundwork being laid for this the backup to the pivot to China. When when the pivot to China inevitably falls flat on its face, Mexico is much closer, and we have a much older neo-colonial relationship with it that I think is going to be one of the more harrowing consequences of the BRICS alliance. Because Mexico wants to be a part of BRICS. Why shouldn't they? It is in their self-determination to join that bloc. And so, of course, the ruling class of America is going to want to thwart that at any cost. They've known this since arriving on the throne of the unipolar world order. The deep state, which has written about this kind of anxiety, Robert Tabor, who was a journalist and a Fed, who wrote the book War of the Flea back in the 70s, spent like a decade or more studying the revolutions of third world countries and finding the common denominator between all of them, and saying that if a revolutionary insurrection happened in Mexico, like what happened in the Southeast Asian and African continents, in other South American countries, if it happened in Mexico, that would signal the end, and we're seeing that now. The deep state has known for 50 years or more that Mexican sovereignty signals the end of its own reign. That's a long answer to your question, but it's something that is going to be really relevant as we see it play out throughout the rest of the year. Man, if you don't follow Dmitry Medvedev on Telegram, that guy is like Shakespearean in his content. He writes these these very powerful statements about the conflicts that's right now in Ukraine, but just that go on in the world in like really powerful paragraphs and some sentences. I know when history immortalizes Dmitry Medvedev, he's gonna have a lot of like good one-liners, saying of saying of the escalation of Ukraine, of the Ukraine war, of Biden not really believing in Russia's ability to instigate a nuclear preemptive strike. And Dmitry Medvedev, at the end of a long sermon, had said, "We all walk under God and rockets," which is legendary. I wish I could have a sentence like that. One, if I went my whole life as a writer, and that was the one sentence people remembered me for, my life will have been worth living. We all walk under God and rockets. Oh my God, write that on my tombstone if I said that. That is mwah. So powerful. And so ballsy. The balls on that guy. Man, all of the thought leaders and and political leaders coming out of Russia right now are incomparable. Yeah, happy to break it down. I do, like I said, I write these blog posts for myself, specifically for the sake of breaking them down later to other people. So if you ever have any other questions, I'm always happy to answer them. Now that we have 2 more people in the live stream, welcome to Hard Targets. This is your open source intel by the people, for the people, and news from a multipolar world. Those of you just tuning in, this is Teray. We have been deprived of any good content from the Trump arraignment. And so I've given up hope that we're going to find any good live streams. But one thing I do want to talk about in a later stream, I've been, so yeah, you should follow me on Telegram, because that you can get a sneak peek of things I will be talking about on stream as I share them in my Telegram channel. For those of you just tuning in, let me get the link here. Make sure to follow me on Telegram. Apologies for the sniffles. I am sick. Yeah, sick and fasting in the middle of Ramadan. Yeah, I am very low energy today, so I do apologize. But you can follow me on Telegram, where I have a lot more to say on these international matters. One thing I do eventually want to talk about, because we've been going for 3 hours now, and I won't belabor the stream much longer. But let's see, where's my own Telegram channel here? Yeah, I do want to talk again about the Israel upcoming civil war, and get an update on that, because there is, I truly believe that, like, or some people believe that, like, the conflict going on there is like is near biblical. You got the Holy Land, you got Zionists imprisoning Christians for proselytizing the Bible in the Holy Land, and brewing civil war between the Likud party and the secular, like, liberal population. You have Iran and Saudi Arabia coming together for the first time in 50 years in solidarity. You have people on Twitter talking about the rise of Greater Syria to unify, like, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. A lot of legendary stuff going on in the region that I feel is worth revisiting. considering the most historical things going on in America right now are being stifled by the American government, that the media has no sound bites, no footage, no images, no memes, no nothing no meat and potatoes to grasp onto for the most historical moments of American democracy of the last 3 years. So revisiting where there is plenty of footage to be had, I think will be a fun time for all. Won't it be fun to talk about civil war in Israel? For now, I will be signing off. It has been a productive 3 hours, and I thank you, Ron Swanson Stalinist, for having the stamina to sit through it all, despite the desert that is mainstream media news coverage for today. Let's all afterwards. Let's all pray for a Trump speech in Mar-a-Lago later tonight, because God knows we need it. God knows we need it. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? Yeah, so I put the link to the stream in the chat. Oh yeah, I didn't. I might as well put the Twitter link in there, because Twitter is replacing the news. The New York Times doesn't have a blue check anymore. Citizen journalism is on the rise. The open source Intel channel for civilian journalism that we all need. Follow me there. With that, I'll be signing off. Thank you all so much. This has been Hard Targets. I am Teray Nasheed. I appreciate you. And until next time, that's all I got. I'm out.